Hello, everyone. I'm here for Elements of Madness. This is Lindsey Dunn, and today I am talking to Julio Quintana, the director of The Long Game, which is screening at South by Southwest in the world premiere section. Julio, welcome to Elements of Madness.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I'm happy to be here.
So I've been getting to know your work and your resume over the last couple of days. One of the things that really impressed me right away is knowing that you worked under the direction of Terrence Malick and worked on Tree of Life and To the Wonder. What role did you play in making those movies, and what are some of the important values you gleaned from working under this legendary director?
So on Tree of Life, my role was I was just a kid basically. So I was an intern at first. I started as an intern in the editorial department, and then as I was moving into cinematography, I started shooting little experiments for Terry and for like the natural history portion, the VFX things, working with Doug Trumbull, the VFX supervisor. Most of Tree of Life was me just uh, doing what I'm told, pointing the camera at weird smoke and things, and they turned it into something amazing. Onto the Wonder, I was in the second unit. I was assisting there's a second unit director who shot a bunch of kind of documentary style footage with Javier Bardem, and we were just a small like, kind of documentary crew following him around in character, and I was assisting him in that stuff. And the whole time I was doing that, Terry, I developed a relationship with Terry, and I was sharing a project I was developing with him, which eventually became The Vessel, and he executive produced that movie. And what I really learned over the course of that film was of the course of just being around Terry was this sort of like just a kind of an openness to the whatever magical things is thrown at you on set, and trying not to be too rigid and not overly planned. And so I feel like his approach has kind of worked its way into different parts of my films. My first movie was a lot more art house, and so over the course of the last couple of films, I've gotten a little bit more mainstream and realized I need a script, and I don't have 100 days to shoot these things and improvise and edit for 2 years. So ultimately, my work ends up being something totally different from what Terry does. But I think the spirit of trying to find like a depth beneath the surface of beneath the plot, trying to infuse some meaning into what I do, is something that he's the master at that, and that was a big influence on me.
In your bio, you also mentioned that after working under Terrence Malick, I don't think I dare call him Terry, but I love that you do. You went on, it says you went on to develop your unique style. How would you characterize your style of filmmaking?
Well, I think that I feel pretty determined to uh, try to tell stories that are meaningful and have sometimes spiritual undertones, but certainly any kind of meaningful kind of broader significance. But at the same time, I want the average person to enjoy the films. I want it to connect with the average person. I'm now a father of 3 children. I know what it's like on a Thursday evening. You're tired. You would like to just watch something that it's engaging, and so I think that I've sort of Terry was an enormous influence on me, but I also just as big an influence filmmakers like Scorsese, Spielberg, those kinds of guys that really know how to put pitches right down the middle for the average audience as well, even if they have meaningful subtext. That's sort of become something that I find interesting. I think also I didn't do it as much in Blue Miracle in my last film, but I guess in this movie I think I tried harder to blend kind of the free flowing cinematography and editing style with a more traditional genre sports piece, and so I think I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out how to fuse kind of pop sensibilities with more serious undertones, and it's a tricky thing to do, but I think I'm starting to figure it out. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed a big tonal difference in, looking at The Vessel and then Blue Miracle and then this movie. There's definitely tonal differences across those. So you're obviously able to play in a sandbox but one thing that is a through line through all of your work is the focus on telling Latinx stories and
Mhm.
helping to bring that culture and people of that culture to the front. And that continues with The Long Game, which is in many ways a classic underdog sports story. Only this time it's a group of Mexican American boys and their coach who were being sidelined and not allowed to play golf at the country club by white society. So, how did you first hear about this story and what drew you to the narrative and wanting to tell it?
Well, I first heard about it. It was actually the same producer who brought me Blue Miracle, which is another true story sports film. He brought me this one as well, and um, I honestly I resisted at first because I felt like I had just done a movie in this genre. I was kind of not interested in doing it again, and but what I found compelling about this story was, my family, they came from Cuba. Both of my parents are from Cuba, and I grew up on stories of them having to piece together cars, one working car from multiple non-working cars, and making their own baseballs out of tape and all that stuff. Um, and so the heart of this story was these young kids who, because they weren't allowed on the course, they'd made their own course out in the middle of nowhere, and they just sort of made an opportunity for themselves. And I think um, that was a particular angle that I hadn't seen. That combination of that sort of them picking themselves up by their bootstraps, combined with the sports movie, combined with the movies that explore race. It was a particular combination that I personally found very compelling and meaningful, and it could be a good vehicle to sort of explore what identity in America is now, and we're having a lot of conversations about race, and um, took it as an opportunity to explore how I feel about these issues and how did my upbringing uh, influence this story and how I think I belong in this place. And so for me it was I like to approach a movie with a question that I personally don't know the answer to, and then try to explore it as honestly as I can, and hopefully I grow from that. And if that's helpful to the audience, then that's great.
So, you might have already said this and I missed it, but you mentioned a question that you don't know the answer to. So, what was the question for The Long Game?
Well, I guess there is everybody knows there's a big debate right now. Basically, it's like people are taking very extreme positions on everything, and one debate about sort of the identity of the United States with regards to race is like, is racism just a myth and it's completely over, or is racism kind of our founding principle our original sin that we're never going to be able to overcome? There's sort of these two polar extremes, and I think the truth is that it's both in a lot of ways. It's in a lot of ways like we have a lot to account for, and we have a lot of work that's left to do, and in other ways we have a lot of ideals that I think are worth striving to maintain. As an immigrant from Cuba, my family just felt lucky to be here. When you leave a place, a pre-oppressive regime, something like this feels very liberating. And so I think for me, I wanted to explore like, well, what does it mean? How do I feel about these particular issues? And again, like this is a really specific thing. This is 1950s South Texas. It's Latinos. A lot of the conversation tends to be around Black America, and this is not about Black America. This is about Latinos in Texas. So in some ways, it's really more like, how do I feel about being in this country? Do I belong here? I purposely added scenes of like when they go to Mexico, and you get the sense right away that they don't belong there, they don't belong here. Those are
Right.
very specific to the Latino community, as opposed to the racism in general. And so these are issues that I found personally I wanted to explore, and it was really more me trying to figure out what again am I Cuban, am I Cuban American, am I American, what am I exactly because when you are the children of immigrants, you sort of just you feel you don't really have a firm footing in any particular community sometimes, and you're just trying to figure it out. So that was really what I was trying to explore, and like I said, anything that I maybe portrayed that is or is not helpful or applicable to other people, I can't say. It's really
Mhm.
just my sort of exploration of how I feel about being here.
Yeah, I love how you I feel like the story did definitely address racism, but it did it in such a natural way throughout the story. And each different people get challenged. You know, the coach challenges the boys about how they are going to act. But at the same time, the coach gets challenged by the gardener at the country club, or the groundskeeper is what
Yeah.
his official
Mhm.
title. You know, so everybody's getting challenged on their beliefs, and in addition, the white coach who's played by, I guess it's Dennis Quaid. Yeah,
Mhm.
he gets confronted right away, where he's like, I don't want to be hanging out with a bunch of juvenile delinquents, and he has to be confronted with his prejudice, like, right there, or his bias, because of
Mhm.
the course they created. So, um, yeah, I thought that was well done. So I'm curious if you already knew a lot about golf, or what you had to do to kind of
Yeah.
be able to shoot this sport effectively.
Yeah, no. So I have played golf many times, and when I was younger, I've never been good at it. I've never had the patience for it. I always played baseball, and I just, for whatever reason, that just does not translate. So most of the time I couldn't afford the balls that I would lose in the lakes and things. Um, so I did not play a lot of golf. I don't like, but I don't like fishing either. So I make movies about things that I don't know a lot about. And then I feel like ultimately with that, the advantage I kind of have in those situations is that, if I can figure out how to make this interesting, then I know that non-golfers will also find it interesting. And I think that proved to be the case on Blue Miracle as well. So I didn't I yeah, full disclosure, when I first was brought this movie, I thought, how do you make a movie about golf? That sounds kind of boring. Um, but then what I tend to do is I'm not really making a golf movie. I make a character movie, and the golf is just sort of a vehicle, and so what my challenge was basically finding out, like, what is okay, given given the way golf is structured, what are the themes that you extract from golf itself? So, like, for example, with Blue Miracle is about fishing, and so you can't with fishing, you can't do the big training montages. They can't get good at it. Or whatever. There's a lot of luck and chance involved. So then that movie just sort of inevitably becomes a bit about faith and will things work out for us in the end or whatever. Um, Golf is totally different. Golf is exclusive, but that's just built into it in a lot of ways. And golf is a lot about etiquette, and it's a lot about propriety and all those things. And so so that inevitably it becomes a great vehicle for making a movie about exclusion and inclusion and things like that, and
Mhm.
also how these young guys could become better men and better people, over the course of they really, what's amazing about golf that I didn't really know before was that it takes there's a real honor system to playing golf. I mean, there's no refs, there's no umpires. The umpires, when you're out there with other people, you're off in the woods. Nobody knows how many times you've hit it against a tree or how many times you hit it out of the sand trap. And so everybody's just trusting each other. Nobody will ever know if you don't fix your divots on the greens or if you don't rake your sand trap and things like that. So there's a certain element of golf that really does require some integrity and honesty, and so that also becomes integrated into the character arc of Joe, and learning how to be a young man with some honor and some integrity, and that becomes, you just have to integrate that into the story. Otherwise, why make a golf movie if you're not going to use the elements of golf to create a character arc? So that's my long way of saying I don't know. I didn't know a lot about golf, but I know about characters, I guess. So I've just turned the golf things I learned into characters. And when I didn't know something, Dennis Quaid was there to chastise me and tell me that's not how they would do it. This is bullshit and all this. So it was fine. It was totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting you talked about building the suspense and the montages, because I do think that's one of the big challenges about a sports movie, because this is a sports movie that doesn't involve running. It's not like a basketball movie or a football movie, and
Mhm.
it's a slower game. And so I was wondering, how you went about structuring it, and you've kind of discussed it. Um, but what were the discussions like as you tried to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this kind of build a suspense during the gameplay, even though, like you said, it's not just about golf, that's the vehicle, but yet you did have to shoot games of golf and a golf competition
Mhm.
and make that interesting and compelling. So what was your strategy for doing that?
Well, partly from like a stylistic standpoint, we didn't want any of the montages to feel the same. You don't want it to be repetitive. And so we designed the montages to be a reflection of where the characters are in the story. So the first montage we shot on a tripod, long lenses, very static, very low energy music. They're just being polite. They're just trying to not offend. And so that's how that stylistically, that's how the thing is shot
Mhm.
and edited. Over the course of the film, you kind of get higher energy. The camera moves faster. By the time you get to the end, they're hitting on the beat of the fast jazz music, and everything's in sync, and it's much higher energy, and you just create a sense that they're progressing. So that's a stylistic thing. Uh, as far as like suspense and stakes, really what you have to do is I had to use for example, I had to use Joe to build in the suspense that you see him, fighting people for no reason or breaking windows or doing things. So you kind of know he's explosive. And then you put him in a situation where being explosive ruins your chances of winning golf. And so then the stakes become like, is he going to basically blow his own chances? Because that's actually a big theme of golf is that, which JB articulates, is that golf, technically you have an opponent, but really like it's you versus your own score. And, you can just look at how Tiger Woods' career tanked after all of his controversy. I mean, such a psychological game that if your head isn't in the right place, it doesn't work. And so then the challenge of those tournaments is kind of creating the suspense of the character's arc. Like, will he be able to get through this without sabotaging himself in some ways?
Mhm. Yeah, that's also very interesting. So my final question is, I feel like anytime you based a story on a book, you have to cut things for expediency's sake. Was there a particular story you wish you could have included in the script but didn't because of editing and you had to cut that baby out?
Yeah, it's funny because there's so many things. Like I'm really big into theme and so like for example, in our movie, we designed it so that like the color palette of the film, it was like we decided that green represented the lush, the money, the wealth. So then the golf courses are the luscious. That's where all the green is. The country club is green, and then the further you get from that, by the time you get to Joe's house, it's yellow and dry, and there's no water. And so there's little bits of things that were in the book that are real. Like for example, in Del Rio, when they in maybe it was in the 40s. I don't know when they actually built that club, but the actual course itself, they built it originally around. There's a spring that provides water for the whole town, and the people who built the golf course built the golf course around the spring, and they got like a 99-year lease for $1 to get unlimited water for their golf course. Basically in perpetuity. While everybody else in the neighborhood, everybody else in town has to pay for water, for example. And like these are things that I was like, God, I wish there's a way, like thematically, that's so poignant, but there's no way to fit those sorts of things. It's just not interesting, it's not visually, but they're like interesting facts that you kind of wish that people would know that there's real things like this um that are related to this story, but just they're not cinematic enough to, and they're not related to a character, so you just can't put those sort of things. Um so just in general, I think I there's little things like that here and there that I found interesting and that I feel like that help, in a medium other than a movie, it would make sense. But for the most part, I think half the power of this of a true story is just leaving out the boring stuff. And people don't, like if you just take out enough boring stuff and you just distill it down to what was really interesting about this person's life and how they really felt. I feel like these true stories actually end up being stronger. It's just you could always bog them down too much in the realism, and so ultimately I'm actually I feel like we told the story we want to tell, and I'm pretty happy with everything we were able to say with it, I think.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed the movie, and I hope it goes well at South by Southwest, and, I encourage you guys to check it out. It's a great underdog sports story, and, looking forward to see what you do next.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lindsay. I appreciate it.
Alright, have a good night.